Okay, we're live. Looks like there's a little bit of a lag. Got one person watching. Let's open up this chat. Never mind, that didn't do nothing for me. Just 1 second, guys. How do I get rid of this screen on here? Copy.
All of the chat will show up right here, so you don't have to touch anything, okay?
I don't have to touch anything. Disaster averted. So it looks like we've got 2 people checking it out right now. I guess that's good as any. We will just get right going then. So the first fly we're going to do is caddis larva. It's a super simple little pattern. This is going to work, most of the year. There's always little caddis pupas floating around in the water. Some of them are in these little shucks that they build, and they can live in there. But once they come free of that, a lot of them are kind of more of a green, olive color in the back, and kind of, a black head on them, or thorax. So I'm going to take this hook out, and I'm going to show you an example of what we're going to tie here. It's a super simple little pattern. It's 4 materials. We've got lead way on the inside. We've got some D-rib, which is just like a vinyl ribbing material. I'll show you that real quick. So that's the rib. You can use, wire for this. You can use thread for this. You don't need fancy stuff. So let's get that out of there. We'll put a fresh hook in the vise. We're tying this on a size 14. It's probably about as big as I'd ever go with this pattern. It's as big as I've ever really caught fish using caddis imitations, but they do go smaller though, for sure. You can definitely tie them down to like a size 18 or something. So here's the D-rib material. What we're going to do is cut that to a 45 degree, and that just preps this piece of material. It's maybe like 1.5 inches of material. Now we're going to grab the fine lead. I'm not sure what size lead this is. It's really fine though. It's for smaller patterns like this. Now we're going to start that pattern, or the lead wraps about halfway down the shank of the hook, and make closed wraps going up pretty close to the eye. I'll leave a little bit of room. I don't like to crowd it too much. Then you can just break that lead right off of there. Hey, Will, I see your comment on there. Glad to see you guys around. I don't know if anyone on here is also tying, but if you are, let me know, and maybe we'll try to keep a better eye on who's watching and what steps they need some help with. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. So now I'm gonna start my thread by the eye of the hook and do some open wraps backwards and capture that lead so that it doesn't move around on the hook. I'm going to cut off that tag end that was on the end there. Now we're going to grab that piece of D-rib material or wire. Okay, we got Will tying along. Tell me if I need to slow down too. So we're going to tie this D-rib material, just a small chunk, just at the back of the hook here. And that little 45-degree angle we cut on there helped it kind of taper away a wee bit. So we're going to tie this D-rib material as far down as we want this curve to go. That's where we're going to start our dubbing. For the dubbing on this fly, I'm using Senyo's laser dub in olive. It's got a little bit of UV in it. I don't know if you can really pick that up on the camera at all, but it's got a little bit of sparkle. You don't need a lot of this. You want to be able to try to dub it on pretty thick. Or not thick, but tight. Want to get a good tight noodle on there. So we got a little noodle of dubbing that we are going to start at the back there. And kind of quickly moving forward, we're going to kind of make a slight taper, all while trying to maintain how tight we're keeping all that. So that's going to be about 2/3 of the shank of the hook, or at least the distance from where you started to the eye. So that's about 2/3 of the olive dubbing. Now we're going to take the D-rib material, and in the same direction, we're going to start that first wrap, which is kind of the hardest. Oh, alright. I guess we're going to go back a step. Redo that. Sometimes your stuff falls apart. So, get the first wrap. You do kind of equal spaced wraps. You're not going to get too many of them. It's a pretty small hook. So once you get that last wrap, you cross your thread to go over that last wrap. Don't let go until you get like, 2 good tight wraps. See how I'm pulling down? And then you can switch hands and you can start doing some wraps in front. So you've got a couple wraps in the back, couple wraps in the front, just to try to help lock that whole thing down. And now just come in with your scissors and cut it as close as you can. And we're literally almost done with this already. So the next step, just a little bit of black dubbing. Not too much at all. We're going to dub that on there, kind of tight as well. Just build up a little bit of a black head and thorax. And this dubbing that I'm using is like some super cheap stuff, and it's called Rabbitron dubbing. I've had this forever. It's got a little bit of flash in it. Just put a little bit more on there to build that up just a bit more. Then build a little bit of a thread head at the top there. That was only like 3 or 4 turns just to make sure it was cleaned up at the front. You're using peacock herl, nice. For the body or for the thorax head part? So I just did my whip finish. I'm not sure if everyone's got a great grasp on that method, and on the internet it seems like it's a bit hard for me to try to explain. But I guess you just kind of got to watch this motion that I'm using here. So I've got the thread, and I lay my whip finisher on the top. Oh, this is impossible. I put the hook in, then I wrap the thread around, and then if I let the whip finisher roll over itself, I've got enough tension to where I can now do some thread whips over the fly there, and that's your knot to seat that. Oh, for the open spiral wraps. That'll look interesting. Send me a picture of that. So that's kind of, yeah, that's the caddis larva we're trying to make today. It's nothing crazy, but you know, it's a pretty accurate representation, and it catches fish, and that's the most important part of that, is that you catch a bunch of fish. So make a dozen of those. Does anyone have any questions about that? See, we've got like 6 or 7 people filtering in or out. That's about it. Alright. I guess we'll probably end up tying a bunch of flies tonight if we're going to be on for a few hours. Hey, Will. Thanks, Ed. Let me know where you're at, Will, because I don't want to start something if you're still tying. But maybe I'll just put this hook in there, and maybe we'll just talk about some of these that we're going to do. I think the next one is just going to be a basic bead head woolly bugger in black. We're going to use some different chenille. I don't like using just a regular chenille, so we're going to use this crystal chenille stuff. I'm not really sure what the brand is or anything. It's just kind of like an olive and black crystal chenille. It looks nice under the hackle. Alright, Will's done with his fly already. Let's see that thing, man. Can you post a picture? I don't know if you can do that. Well, either way. So, this hook right here is a size 12, 4x long. Nope, I lied. This is a size 8, 3x long, with a gold tungsten bead. So this is kind of going to be a bit of a heavier fly, and to even add to that, we're going to put like some omega sized lead wraps on there as well. Scroll down. What are you having trouble with, Will? Was it the whip finish? Oh, you don't? Are you saying you don't know how to post a picture? We can figure it out later. We'll get around there. No worries. But anyways, let's get this one started. Looks like we got a couple more people that joined us. We're up to 11 viewers. That's pretty cool. So, size 12, 3x long hook. It's pretty standard for, most sizes of woolly buggers. This is kind of like the mid-range size, I think. We're going to start wrapping a bunch of lead on this one too. Like a good amount of lead. And what I did there is I kind of, once I got those broken off the ends, I slid that lead way up into the bead. It's about the same exact size to fit in there and lock that thing into place. And then I'm going to take my thread. Yes, some more. Yes, cool. Alright. I've got some black thread here, same we used on the other fly. A lot of people get there's a lot of opinions on thread. I don't particularly care. I like, a thicker thread for a bigger fly, and I've got a couple colors that I really like, and black is usually good for almost anything, so I keep, 2 or 3 bobbins spooled up with different sizes of black thread. And most of the time I don't even look at the size of it, because just be conscious with the amount of thread you put on it, because it does build up if you're using a thick thread. This is kind of a floss, so it doesn't build up too bad. But anyways, let's get back on topic. We're going to get that lead on there secured. I'm going to get a marabou plume. You're going to preen the tips towards the back of the fly. Now I use my fingers to measure the length of the tail, and I want the tail to be I use the shank to measure the length of the tail. I'm using my fingers there to pinch it off. I want it to be maybe just a little bit longer than the shank of the hook. You can see how it sticks off the end, maybe like 1/8 of an inch or so. That's good. It doesn't have to be that precise, and that's really subjective, so that's up to you how long you want your tail. So what I just did there too, I didn't say anything, but I just used that measurement, pinched it in my other hands. Now I have that measurement right here. So when I bring that back and place it there, that's the same length. I didn't have to, if you hold the materials in the right hand and do that, you don't really have to mess around with like flipping it over and grabbing it and unaligning the tips. So that's just kind of one little method to make things a little bit neater when you're tying. I'm going to go ahead and snip that excess stuff off of there. It's okay that it's all fluffy and weird like this, because we're just going to wrap right through it. Most of that's going to go right away. So a lot of people at this point, once you get the tail on, you got all that stuff secured, they'll add some flash down the side. I really don't like the flash on the tail. I think it impedes this from being more flowy and natural. It kind of tucks it all in, and it kind of just does an up and down. It doesn't get too much lateral movement, so I kind of like to leave the tail without any flash on it, because I think it hampers the swimming motion, the leechy, swimmy motion of a woolly bugger. So just bind all that down. Now I'm going to add a piece of copper wire. This is a brassy size. The size doesn't particularly matter. I like to be able to see it through there just a little bit, just to add a little bit of color, but Its main job is to hold all the other materials and secure them down as you're wrapping everything forward. So we're going to put the wire on the side of the hook, like your side of the hook, and tie that wire in with some pretty tight wraps. You know, you want to at least secure, you know, 1/2 inch of that in there onto the shank of the hook so it doesn't pull out. The tighter the wraps, the better. Alright, next material will be our hackle. We're going to pick kind of one of these longer ones. I did a test run before this and found out that some of these were a little too short, so we're going to find a decent sized hackle. You kind of, there's certain hackles that work better for woolly buggers, and you know, the softer the hackle the better. The more rigid that these fibers are, these hackle fibers. Let's see, where am I? Yeah, the more rigid that those are, the kind of more rigid the woolly bugger becomes. So you see how these have a nice bend to them. They're kind of soft and sticking together, and you know, they're not just like really straight and stiff, because it's not really gonna produce what we're looking for. I kind of want those things to fold over and kind of streamline with the woolly bugger as it gets wet. You know, I kind of just want it to add some dimension to the front of the bug. I don't particularly want it to look like spines coming off of it or anything like that. I kind of want that to wash into something. So we've got the tip exposed here. What I did was I preened back the fibers. I grabbed the tip and preened back these fibers to expose the tip. Now we're going to tie that in the same way we just did with the wire. It's on our side. We just, you know, tie in 1/2 inch or maybe even a little bit more. If there's any excess, you go ahead and just snip that right off. And wrap that down really nice. Our next material and our last material is going to be the fancy chenille. And well, if you don't have this, like, whatever, use whatever chenille you have, you know. Start experimenting with different colors and stuff. You know, like, I like to use like crystal white and black sometimes, or gray and black, or purple and black, chartreuse and black, olive and chartreuse, white and red. Yeah, there's a lot of different, you know, there's a lot of different color combinations that you can utilize for different, you know, species or time of the year. And recently we've been catching, you know, piles of crappie on woolly buggers, you know, and if it turns off for a second, just change color. I was using a black one and probably caught a dozen fish, and then switched over. Once they stopped biting, I switched over to an olive, and they started biting that one. Once that stopped working, changed over to a white one, they started biting that one. So super versatile, especially for the multi-species type of stuff. So I just kind of cut, like, you know, a 2-inch section of that. And when you're tying this chenille in, or any chenille, it's got like a little bit of a let's see if we see it. It's got a cord inside, so that cord is way easier to tie in and not as bulky and not as slippery as tying onto the other stuff. So you're going to use that and tie that also in the same way that you tied in the last two materials. So now you've got a chenille, you've got a hackle, and a wire tied in. And we did that in that order for a reason, because this is the first material. The chenille is the first material we're going to tie or wrap up the shank of the hook. And then after that we're going to do the hackle, and then after that we're going to do the wire. So everything's now organized neatly on top of the one that's going to be used next. So you're not like wrapping around a material and getting fibers stuck or bending stems the wrong direction. You know, this is ready to go, then this is ready to go, and then this is ready to go. So that's kind of the method behind that madness. And I'm not, you know, I think it works a bit better that way, so I do it. So before we even wrap that, let's wrap our thread up to behind the bead here. And then we're going to take, you know, kind of touching wraps with the chenille. I've got a rotary vise. If any of you guys do, you can use that function here. Super helpful, especially for wrapping chenille. Except in this case, the hackle keeps wanting to fight me, but whatever. So we're going to tie off that chenille up at the front. Do a couple wraps behind. Do a couple wraps in front. Then you can cut the excess away. You got a pretty even body. Next material, we're going to wrap the same direction, which is the direction of the thread. So we're wrapping the thread around like this. So we're going to wrap those first two materials that same way. And try not to get like too much spin into the hackle. It'll start twisting on you, so kind of untwist it as you're adding the hackle. You can also kind of preen it back. Preen those fibers as you're going here. Once you get to the bead up front, I like to do like at least one or two wraps right there. It kind of looks like a mess right now, but just lock that hackle in with one wrap, give it another one, and then you got to start just preening these fibers back and wrapping over. This is where you got to be like super conscious about the amount of wraps you use. So like you can tug on this stuff pretty good, these hackle fibers. So just make sure you preen them all backwards. I got like 4 wraps on it there, and I'm gonna stop wrapping stuff. See if we can move this back. I might make an adjustment here. Oh, that's still pretty clear. Purple dubbed L. caricatus. Sorry, I haven't been paying attention to these. Yeah, I got my spring right here, but it's kind of like loose and ineffectual. It doesn't do anything anymore. There used to be like a little holder for it, and I lost the holder. So now, unless I've got it in a certain position, it hardly does what I want it to do. But it was cool. So we still got one more material here as well. We're going to preen these kind of forward now. Kind of fluff them up. And we're going to wrap this the opposite. We wrapped the other two materials in this direction, with the same direction as our thread, Because what that did is once we stopped the material and we bound it, it pulled the material too. If you wrap the other way, sometimes it kind of, if you wrap the material the other way like this, and you wrap this way, there can be a little bit of slack, but what we're using this copper for here is just to lash down that material. It doesn't need to be super strong. It already is really, really strong, so we're going to wrap that through there kind of quickly as to not trap too many of these fibers. I'm going to do like 2 or 3 wraps behind, 2 or 3 wraps in front. A lot of people will just, helicopter this way. It's not my favorite way to do it, but we'll try to do that. We'll save everyone's scissors. So you just kind of grab that close, and when you twist it and do a little helicopter twist, it'll break right off of there. And then once again, just get a couple wraps right here in the front to secure and cover up the end of that copper there. Now we're onto this whip finish to finish this fly off. I do like 4 of them. On a woolly bugger, I like to do it at least twice. Some teethy fish. This is a heavy fly, so it's going to be dragging on the bottom a bit too. It's a little bit big of a collar, but I don't think the fish care. There's a pretty cool little woolly bugger. If you don't like a big collar like that, just throw a little bit of like that olive ice dubbing we were using for our laser, the Senyos laser, olive, and just kind of brush it out. If you use that as a dubbing on there and brush it out, it'll cover up that collar and kind of fade into the hackle collar, you know. But yeah, so that's kind of just a super basic woolly bugger right there. How'd yours come out? Well, man, we did that in 33 minutes. We're going to tie all sorts of stuff. When you get good at tying, you'll be tying a dozen woolly buggers in 30 minutes. Then you'll hate tying woolly buggers. It'll fish. It'll definitely fish. I don't think the fish care at all. So, I was gonna tie a woolly bugger variation. What kind of hooks do you have? 'Cause I wanna do this guy right here. The old articulated woolly bugger for fishing, you know, some bigger, toothier critters. Maybe not like toothy critters, but you know, this is a nice articulated pattern with a super light little tail that flutters nice. It's got the same tungsten bead and a bunch of lead up front, so it kind of does the wave. That's right, Ed. Woolly buggers until your fingers are bleeding from all the woolly buggers. But I'd like to tie this, but I'd like to see if I could get Will to tie one of these. You just kind of 9, 14, 11, and 9, and then larger hooks. Okay, so if you have a 9 and a 14, you'll be able to do this. 14 might be a little bit small. Do a 9 and an 11. I'm using beadalon. It's like a articulation wire, but you can use braid. You just make sure you got to wrap it in there really good. Thank you, Joshua. You'll do it? Sweet. Let's do it. This thing's gonna be gnarly. I've caught more big trout on this than any large, ridiculous streamers, you know, which I still like to tie, but you know, this one's super effective. You know, it's just a bit bigger than a woolly bugger. It moves a lot better than a woolly bugger, and fish like to eat it. So we're going to do that. Sweet. Alright, so we're going to start here with our smaller hook. In my case, I'm using a 12 4X long. And in the front, I'm going to use the, the 8 3X long. And the reason that we do that, let me move this over a bit, is to try to prevent fouling. Sometimes when this rear hook, this is awkward to do this. My orientation's weird. Sometimes this rear hook will swing around when you're casting and get caught like underneath in between that because of the articulation. But if you use a smaller hook in the back, it's less likely to happen. And then also when you're attaching it to the front hook, you want to wrap down the bend a little bit with your articulation wire or your braid or your monofilament or whatever you're using there. And yeah, use the 25-pound mono. That's definitely good enough. And I'll show you how to wrap the mono back over itself once we get there. But either way, let's start with this back hook. We work from the back forward like we do with most flies. So what we're going to do here is get another marabou plume, black marabou plume. We're going to do the same deal with the tips. We're going to line those. These I like to make definitely a little bit longer than the hook because this is a smaller hook. Guess we should attach some thread, huh? Would probably be helpful. So we've got our thread on our back hook there. We've got about a shank and a half worth of marabou. We're going to tie that on. Back to the bend while keeping it pinched and on top of the hook there. Sweet. That looks good. We'll come up a little bit. Lift up that excess material, cut it off pretty close. On these smaller hooks, we got to be really careful about building up bulk. The bulk will definitely get you. And then again, like I said before, I don't use flash on the side. I think it stops it from moving, and I don't like that. So we're gonna Do the same exact thing we did with the regular woolly bugger. I'm going to tie in our wire. Weird stuff going on here. There we go, that looks better. It was all crooked. Get another semi-longer hackle. Tie that in like we did the other time. We preen back those fibers, tie in the tip facing forward, cover up the tips with some wraps. The last material is the chenille that we clean a little bit of the cord out of there. Tie that in on top of everything else. Tied in nice, move the thread up to the front. Throw some chenille onto the body here. Use the rotary feature. More. You see how I sometimes I really move the hook in the vise. This is just like a little Renzetti Traveler. It's not like a heavy duty vise, but I wrench on that stuff pretty good to make sure this material doesn't fall out or do anything weird. So I'm going to start preening these fibers towards the back. Helps out a little bit. Just help everything go in the right direction. So I'm pulling pretty good on them. That's another important thing, is you can manipulate your materials a lot better if it's tied in well. So manipulate that a bit. Start wrapping all that forward. And then this one, you want to get pretty close to the eye, but you don't want to crowd it too much because we got to tie in. We got to loop some kind of articulation material, whatever you guys are using, whether that's mono or beadalon, braid. So it's pretty stacked right there. It's got a lot of hackle on it. It's going to give it a lot of body in the water. Now we're onto the copper wire here. We're going to try to go through this kind of nice and even like. Nice even rib. Doesn't look ugly. Try not to trap down any of these fibers. You might have to pull some of these softer ones forward. Once it gets over to the top, do 2 or 3 reps behind it. 2 or 3 reps in front of it. If you got any stray fibers, just cut them out of the way. Don't cut your thread like I almost did. That was bad. Most people don't use their scissors for the thread, but I do, because I don't like helicoptering stuff, and scissors aren't that expensive, so unless you buy nice scissors, then I guess don't do that. So, just messed up our whip finish. So we're going to whip finish this part of the fly, and this is our back half. It's on our smaller hook. I'm going to do a couple extra whip finishes on there for good luck. Tighten it up. Cut it. Now pretty much what we're going to do is build another one on a bigger hook in the front and put a wire in there to connect the two together. That way you have an articulated swimming streamer. So we're just going to put this guy to the side for now. So put it somewhere safe so you don't lose it. I had a pair of nippers around here. There we go. So I just cut about 2 inches of beetle on. It's not too much. What we're gonna do, oh, that's not what we're gonna do. We're gonna put a bead on that, like I said before. We're gonna put a big 5/32 tungsten gold bead on there, which is super duper heavy. We're gonna use bunch of big heavy duty lead to hold it in place and add some extra weight. I really like this pattern to be like, have the lychee, like, you know, like kinda swimmy. I don't know, you know what I'm talking about. I like it to swim up and down like. So I'm going to stuff that lead up into the bead. So I got the wraps nice and tight. I stuff it up in there. Yeah, well that was the 5/32 tungsten gold bead. Any big old bead will work. Sometimes I do them in the big orange beads for like steelheading and stuff, if regulations allow. But yeah, it's just a big old bead. Then I'm gonna, ooh, it's gross. Then I'm going to start at the back of that lead with some thread. It's the same 140 denier, UTC. I'm going to wrap that back. We're going to get our piece of articulation material. In my case, beadalon. In Will's case, 25-pound monofilament, which is going to be solid. We're going to tie that in down at the bend of the hook Notice how I left a little bit extra here at the front. I tied it in at a point where I'd have some coming out the tip here, because once we wrap this all the way up, we're going to bend that back and we're going to tie that down too, so it's got, you know, it's anchored in both directions. It doesn't want to move on us. So the first one I like to do, I kind of like to keep it towards the bottom of my side of the hook. And I like the returning side to be on top of that one, but everything's kind of on my side of the hook and stacked on top of itself. What that does is it might offset it a little bit, but it makes it so that goes straight up and down, and they sit right on top of each other. And this is kind of important, that you don't use an insane amount of thread here. You just make all your wraps really count with a lot of pressure on them. But you don't want to build up too much bulk, because you're just going to keep adding here as the more we fold this wire over itself and do all that kind of stuff. Make sure everyone's kind of tuned in. Alright, so here's the back half. What we're going to do is feed that beetle on through there. This is free swinging, super flowy back there and stuff. And what we're going to do is capture the articulation material with kind of maybe some more light wraps right on top. This is still on my side of the thread that I'm tying this, but right on top of the previous one, so that it kind of gives it a I don't really know what to call that. It just makes it stand up straight in the back, so that the back half of your fly, the hook's pointing straight down as well, because the eye and the articulation are, different directions there. So if the articulation wire was flat instead of vertical like that, this fly would fly or swim like all sideways and weird. You don't want that. I guess it doesn't really matter, but I don't want that. It's pretty important to make that, pretty small. You want this to be free, but you don't want everything to be kind of loose and wild back here. So now what I'm doing is kind of manipulating these tag ends of articulation material. I'm manipulating them and pulling them backwards, and then wrapping over them again. And we're going to wrap those down super duper tight. And in most cases you'd want to add glue here, but I'm pretty confident, especially since I don't have glue directly on me, and that's probably my excuse. I'm pretty confident that that'll never pull out of there. Like, you can really reef on that. It's not going anywhere. 30-pound trout is, going to break your line before anything happens to a fly like that. If you're ever lucky enough to catch a 30-pound trout. It's a strange reference. Alright. So now we are attached on both sides there. Our next move here is going to kind of make a little bit of a veil that covers up that articulation. But we want it to be sparse. We don't want like a lot of material or anything. We just want to cover that up a little bit so it doesn't look all unnatural. So what I just did there was the same piece of marabou that I cut the tips off of. I just stripped half of the remaining side, barbules here. I ripped those off the one side, you can see, and those tips are pretty much aligned. It's not too important. Sometimes when they're not aligned, it kind of makes it fade in a little bit better. And this, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to kind of just, hook shank length, transfer that measurement into your other hand, and just lash that down at the back of our front hook. Wrap that down a bit. Get rid of all the excess material. And lash all the butt ends down real nice. Is that what you heard? That was a full guarantee. Next outing, money back guarantee. Oh man. It's opened a can of worms with that one. No pun intended. Pa-pa-pa-pa. Kinda, yeah. So we're gonna get some more copper wire on here and do the same thing we did in the back and the front, leading up. This is like just literally doing the woolly bugger we did before. So now we're just doing this as the front half of this fly. Right, we need to get another hackle in there. This looks like a good one. Use this guy. We are preening the fibers back from the tip. We are tying in the tip. Make sure that's lashed down really good. We're going to tie in the chenille next. Re-exposed the bit of cord in the middle of that. My thread's getting unraveled. If you use like a floss or a multi-strand thread, you just spin it to cord it back up. Just spin it a bunch, like it's hard to do. I can't really see it. The camera's not that big, but spin it. Alright, we got that tied in. That's right. I would be, I'll be amazed with you. For sure. Alright, let's palmer this chenille up the shank here. I'm going to do 2 wraps behind. I just did 3. 2 wraps in front. I just did 3 because I like to lie to everybody. It's kind of the same song and dance. It's like weird to Keep repeating steps here. It's a woolly bugger attached to a woolly bugger. Maybe. Everyone wants to tie articulated, streamers. There's no loose here. It's like an immense, you put so much time into them, but I just love seeing that stuff when it's done, it's something to enjoy for 10 minutes before you lose it in a tree. I'll start palmering this up. It's always just woollyception. So I got like 2 or 3 good wraps at the front there too. It's a little messy right now, but once you preen it back, you get 1 or 2 good wraps behind it. And then preen everything back. I don't even cut the end off until everything's preened back and locked into that position. And then you can come and there's just a little bit of that, the end of that hackle. Just get that off.